The continued story of Taran, the assistant pig-keeper. I'm glad you stayed to listen. Now sit round, as Papa Bear reads a story. Chapter 17. The Choice. It was Eledir, with Islamok following. He strode to the river bank. Dry mud caked his tawny hair and grimed his face. His cheeks and hands had been cruelly slashed. His blood-stained jacket was half ripped from his shoulders, and he wore no cloak. His eyes glittered feverishly. Eledir halted before the speechless companions, threw back his head, and glanced scornfully at them. "Well met," he said in a hoarse voice, "brave companion of scarecrows." His lips drew back in a taut, bitter grin. "The pig boy, the scullery maid, I do not see the dreamer." "What do you here?" Taran cried, facing angrily. "You dare speak of Adon? He is slain, and lies beneath his burial mound. You have betrayed us, son of Pen the Cur. Where were you when the huntsman was set upon us? When another sword would have turned the balance. The price was Adon's life. A better man than you shall ever be." Eledir did not reply, but moved stiffly past Taran, and squatted down near the pile of saddlebags. "Give me food," he said sharply. "Roots and rainwater have been my meat and drink." "Evil monster!" shouted Gorgie, leaping to his feet. "There are no crunchings and munchings for wicked villain. No, no!" "Hold your tongue," said Eledir, "or you shall hold your head." "Give him food as he asks," Taran ordered. Muttering furiously, Gergie obeyed and opened the wallet. "And just because we're feeding you," cried Elenwy, "don't think you're welcome to it." "The scullery maid is not pleased to see me," said Eledir. "She shows temper." "Can't say I really blame her," rejoined Fluter. "And I don't see that you should expect anything else. You've done us a bad turn. Would you have us hold you a festival?" "The harp scraper is still with you, I see," Eledir said, seizing the food from Gergie. "But I see he is a bird with the wing down." "Birds again," muttered the bard with a shudder. "Shall I never be allowed to forget Ordu?" "Why do you seek us?" Taran demanded. "You were content to leave us once. What brings you here now?" "Seek you?" Eledir laughed harshly. "I seek the marshes of Morva." "Well, you're a long way away from them," Elenwy cried. "But if you're in a hurry to get there, as I hope you are, I'll be glad to give you directions, and while you're there, I suggest you find Ordu, Orwin, and Orgok. They'll be happier to see you than we are." Eledir wolfed down his food and settled himself against the saddlebags. "That is better," he said. "Now there's a bit more life in me." "Enough to take you wherever you happen to be going," snapped Elenwy. "And wherever you happen to be going," replied Eledir, "I wish you the joy of your journey. You shall find huntsmen enough to satisfy you." "What?" cried Taran. "Are the huntsmen still abroad?" "Yes, pig boy," Eledir answered. "All Anuvan is astir. The huntsmen I have outrun, a noble game of hare and hounds. The Gwythaints have had their sport of me," he added with a contemptuous laugh, "though it cost them 2 of their number. But enough remain to offer you a good hunting, if that is your pleasure." "I hope you didn't lead them to us," Elenwy began. "I led them nowhere," said Eledir. "Least of all to you, since I did not know you were here. When the Gwythaints and I parted company, I assure you I gave little heed to the path I chose." "You can still choose your path," said Elenwy, "so long as it leads you from us, and I hope you follow it as swiftly as you did when you sneaked away." "Sneaked away?" laughed Eledir. "A son of Pen the Cur does not sneak. You were too slow-footed for me. There were matters of urgency to attend to." "Your own glory," Taran replied sharply. "You thought of nothing else. At least, Eledir, speak the truth." "It is true enough I meant to go to the marshes of Morva," Eledir said with a bitter smile, "and true enough I did not find them, though I should had the huntsman not barred my way." "From the scullery maid's words," Eledir went on, "I gather you have been to Morva." Taran nodded. "Yes, we have been there. Now we return to Cair Dallben." Eledir laughed again. "And you, too, have failed. But since your journey was the longer, I ask you which of us wasted more of his labors and pains?" "Failed?" cried Taran. "We did not fail. The cauldron is ours. There it lies," he added, pointing past the river bank to the black hump of the Crocan. Eledir sprang to his feet and looked across the water. "How then?" he shouted wrathfully. "Have you cheated me once more?" His face darkened with rage. "Do I risk my life again? so that a pig boy may rob me of my prize. His eyes were frenzied, and he made to seize Taran by the throat. Taran struck away his hand. I have never cheated you, son of Pen the Cur, he cried. Your prize? Risk your life? We have lost life and shed blood for the cauldron. Yes, a heavy price has been paid, heavier than you know, Prince of Pen the Cur. Eledir seemed to strangle on his own rage. He stood without moving, his face working and twitching, but he soon forced himself to seem again cold and haughty, though his hands still trembled. So, pig boy, he said in a low, rasping voice, you have found the cauldron after all, yet indeed it would seem to belong more to the river than to you. Who but a pig boy would leave it stranded thus? Did you not have the wits enough or strength enough to smash it, that you must bear it with you? The Crocan cannot be destroyed unless a man give up his life in it, Taran answered. We have wits enough to know that it must be put safely in Dolben's hands. Would you be a hero, pig boy? Asked Eledir. Why do you not climb into it yourself? Surely you are bold enough. Or are you a coward at heart when the test is put upon you? Taran disregarded Eledir's taunt. We need your help, he said urgently. Our strength fails us. Help us bring the Crocan to Caradolban. Help us bring the Crocan to Caradolban. Or at least aid us to move it to the riverbank. Eledir threw back his head and laughed wildly. Help you? So that a pig boy may strut before Gwydion and boast of his deeds, and a prince of Pen the Cur play the churl. No, you shall have no help from me. I warn you to take your own part. Do it now, pig boy. Elenwy screamed and pointed to the sky. Gwythaints! A flight of 3 Gwythaints soared high above the trees, racing with the wind-driven clouds. The gigantic birds sped closer. Taran and Elenwy caught up Fluter between them and stumbled into the bushes. Gurgi, almost witless with fear, pulled on the horses' bridles, leading them to the safety of the trees, while Eledir followed. The Gwythaints swooped downward, the wind rattling in their flashing feathers. With harsh and fearsome shrieking the Gwythaints circled around the cauldron, blotting out the sun with their black wings. One of the ferocious birds came to rest on the Crocan, and for an instant remained poised there, beating its wings. The Gwythaints made no attempt to attack the companions, but circled once again, then drove skyward. They veered north, and the mountains quickly hid them. Pale and shaking, Taran stepped from the bushes. They have found what they are seeking, he said. Oran will soon know the Crocan waits to be plucked from our hands. He turned to Eledir. Help us, he asked again. I beg you, we dare not lose a moment. Eledir shrugged and strode down the riverbank into the shallows where he looked closely at the half-sunken Crocan. It can be moved, he said, when he returned. But not by you, pig boy. You will need the strength of Islamak added to your own steeds, and you will need mine. Lend us your strength, then, Taran pleaded. Let us raise the cauldron, and be gone from here before more of Oron's servants arrive. Perhaps I shall, perhaps I shall not, answered Eledir with a strange look in his eyes. Did you pay a price to gain the cauldron? Very well. You shall pay another one. Hear me, pig boy, he went on. If I help you bear the cauldron to Caradolban, it shall be on my own conditions. This is no time for conditions, cried Elenwy. We don't want to listen to your conditions, Eledir. We'll find our own way to get the Crocan out. Or we'll stay here with it, and one of us can go back and bring Gwydion. Stay here and be slain, Eledir replied. No, it must be done now, and done as I say, or not at all. He turned to Taran. These are my conditions, he said. The Crocan is mine, and you shall be under my command. It is I who found it, not you, pig boy. It is I who fought for it and won it. So you shall say to Gwydion and the others. And you shall all swear the most binding oath. No, we shall not, cried Elenwy. You ask us to lie, so that you may steal the Crocan, and steal our own efforts with it. You are mad, Eledir. Not mad, scullery maid, said Eledir, his eyes blazing, but weary to my death. Do you hear me? All my life I have been forced into the second rank. I have been put aside, slighted. Honor, it has been denied me at every turn, but this time I shall not let the prize slip from my fingers. Adon saw a black beast on your shoulders, Taran said quietly, and I too have seen it. I see it now, Eledir. I care nothing for your black beast, shouted Eledir. I care for my honor. Do you think, Taran said, I care nothing for mine? What is the honor of a pig boy, laughed Eledir, compared to the honor of a prince? I have paid for my honor, answered Taran, his voice rising, more dearly than you would pay for yours. Do you ask me now to cast it away? You, pig boy, dared reproach me for seeking glory, said Eledir. Yet you yourself cling to it with your dirty hands. I shall not tarry here. My terms, or nothing. Make your choice. Taran stood silent. Elenwy seized Eledir by the jacket. How dare you ask such a price? Eledir drew away. Let the pig boy decide. It is up to him whether he will pay it. If I swear this, Taran said, turning to the companions, you must swear along with me. Once given, I will not break an oath, and it would be even more to my shame if I broke this one. Before I can decide, I must know whether you too will bind yourselves. On this, we must all agree. No one spoke. At length, Fluter murmured, I put the decision in your hands, and abide by what you do. Gurgi nodded his head solemnly. I shall not lie, Elenby cried. Not for this traitor and deserter. It is not for him, Taran said quietly, but for the sake of our quest. It isn't right, Elenby began, tears starting in her eyes. We do not speak of rightness, Taran answered. We speak of a task to be finished. Elenby looked away. Fluter has said the choice is yours, she murmured at last. I must say the same. For a long moment Taran did not speak. All the anguish he had felt when Adon's brooch had left his hands returned to him, and he recalled Elenwy's words in his blackest despair. The girl's voice telling him that nothing could take away what he had done. Yet this was the very price Eledir demanded. Taran bowed his head. The cauldron is yours, Eledir. We are at your command, and all things shall be as you say. Thus we swear. Heavy-hearted and silent, the companions followed Eledir's orders and once again lashed ropes around the sunken Crocan. Eledir hitched the 3 horses side by side, then attached the lines to them. While Fluter held the bridles with his uninjured hand, the companions waded into the shallows. Eledir, standing up to his knees in the rushing water, commanded Taran, Elenwy, and Gurgi to post themselves on either side of the Crocan, and keep it from slipping back against the boulders. He signaled an order to the waiting bard, then bent to his own task. As he had done with Melonless long before, Eledir thrust his shoulders as far below the cauldron as the rocks allowed. His body tensed. The veins rose to bursting on his streaming forehead. Still the cauldron did not yield. Beside him, Taran and Elenwy heaved vainly at the sling. Gasping for breath, Eledir turned once more to the Crocan. The sling creaked against the boulders. The ropes strained. Eledir's shoulders were cut and bleeding, his face deathly white. He choked out another command to the companions. His muscles trembled in a final effort. With a cry he pitched forward into the water, stumbling to gain his balance. Then he gave an exultant shout. The cauldron had lifted free. Desperately the companions labored to bring the Crocan to shore. Eledir seized one end of the sling and thrust ahead. The cauldron skidded to dry, firm ground. On the river bank they quickly roped the sling between Melonless and Luger. Eledir hitched up Islamak as the leading horse, to guide the others and bear a share of the weight. Until then Eledir's eyes had burned with triumph, but now his face changed. My cauldron has been won back from the river, he said with a curious glance at Taran. But I think perhaps I was too hasty. You met my terms too quickly, he added. Tell me, what is in your mind, pig boy? Rage filled him again. I know well enough. Once more you would try and cheat me. You have my oath, Taran began. What is the oath of a pig boy? Eledir said. You gave it. You will break it. Speak for yourself, Elenwy said angrily. That's what you would do, Prince of Penluker, but we are not like you. The cauldron needed all of us to raise it, Eledir continued, lowering his voice. But does it now need all of us to carry it? A few would serve, he added. Yes, yes. Only a few. Perhaps only one if you are strong enough. Was my price too low? He went on, spinning around to face Taran. Eledir, Taran cried, you are truly mad. Yes, laughed Eledir. Mad to believe your word alone. The price must be silence. Utter silence. His hand moved to his sword. Yes, pig boy, I know in time we should have to face one another. He lunged forward, his sword out and raised. Before Taran could draw his own blade, Eledir swung viciously and pressed to the attack. Taran stumbled down the riverbank and leaped to a boulder, feverishly grasping for his weapon. Eledir strode into the water while the companions raced to stop him. As Eledir swung his blade again, Taran lost his footing and toppled from the boulder. He tried to rise, but the stones slipped from underneath him. and he stumbled backwards. He threw up his hands. The current was clutching at him, and he fell. The sharp edge of a rock loomed up, and he knew no more. Chapter 18. The Loss. It was night when Taran came to his senses. He found himself propped against the log, a cloak wrapped around him. His head throbbed, his body ached. Ellenby was bending over anxiously. Taran blinked his eyes and tried to sit up. For some moments his memory held only a mingling of sights and sounds, of rushing water, a stone, a shout. His head still whirled, a yellow light shone in his eyes. He realized, as his mind gradually cleared, that the girl had lit the golden sphere and had set it on the log. Beside him, a small fire blazed. Crouched next to it, the bard and Gurgi fed twigs to the fire. "I'm glad you decided to wake up," Ellenby said, trying to appear cheerful, as Fluter and Gurgi came to kneel beside Taran. "You swallowed so much of the river, we were afraid we'd never be able to pump it out of you, and that wrap on your head didn't help matters." "The Krokan!" Taran gasped. "Eledir?" He looked around him. "This fire," he murmured. "We dare not show a light. Auron's warriors." "It was either build a fire or let you freeze to death," said the bard. "So of course we decided on the first. At this point," he added with a wry grin, "I doubt it can make too much difference. Since the cauldron is out of our hands, I don't believe Auron will have quite the same interest in us. Happily, I might say." "Where is the Krokan?" Taran asked, despite his spinning head. He raised himself from the log. "It is with Eledir," said Ellenby. "And if you ask where he is," put in the bard, "we can answer you very quickly. We do not know." "Wicked prince goes off with wicked pot," Gurgi added. "Yes, yes, with ridings and stridings." "Good riddance to them," agreed Fluter. "I don't know which is worse, the Krokan or Eledir. Now at least they're both together." "You let him go?" Taran cried in alarm. He put his hands to his head. "You let him steal the Krokan?" "Let is hardly the word, my friend," the bard answered ruefully. "You seem to have forgotten," Ellenby added. "Eledir was trying to kill you. It's a good thing you fell into the river, because I can tell you the goings-on weren't very pleasant on the shore." "It was terrible, as a matter of fact," the girl went on. "We'd all started after Eledir. By that time you were already floating down the river like a twig in a, well, like a twig in a river. We tried to save you, but Eledir turned on us." "I'm certain he meant to kill us," Ellenby said. "You should have seen his face, and his eyes. He was furious. Worse than that, Fluter tried to stand against him." "That villain has the strength of 10," said the bard. "I could barely draw my sword. It's clumsy when you have a broken arm, you understand. But I faced him. A dreadful clash of weapons. You've never seen the prowess of an outraged flam. Another moment and I should have had him at my mercy, in a manner of speaking." The bard added quickly. "He knocked me sprawling." "And Gurgi fought too. Yes, yes, with smitings and bitings." "Poor Gurgi," said Ellenby. "He did his best, but Eledir picked him up and tossed him against a tree. When I tried to draw my bow, he snatched it away and snapped it in his hands. He chased us into the woods after that," Fluter said. "I've never seen a man in such a frenzy, shouting at the top of his voice, calling us robbers and oath-breakers, and that we were trying to keep him in second place. And that's all he's able to say or think now, if you choose to call that thinking." Taran shook his head sadly. "I fear the black beast has swallowed him up as Adon warned," he said. "I pity Eledir from the bottom of my heart." "I should pity him more," muttered Fluter, "if he hadn't tried to slice off my head." "For long I hated him," Taran said. "But in the little while I bore Adon's brooch, I believe I saw him more clearly. His heart is unhappy and tormented, nor shall I forget what he said to me, that I taunted him for seeking glory, yet clung to it myself." Taran spread his hands in front of him. "With dirty hands," he said heavily. "Pay no heed to what Eledir says," Ellenby cried. "After what he made us do, he has no right to blame anyone for anything." "After what he made us do, he has no right to blame anyone for anything." "And yet," Taran said softly, almost to himself, "he spoke the truth." "Did he?" said Ellenby. "It was only too true. For his own honor he would have slain us all." "We managed to escape from him," Fluter continued. "That is, he finally stopped pursuing us when we came back. The horses, the Krokan, and Eledir were gone. After that we followed down the river looking for you. You hadn't gone far, but I'm still amazed that anyone can swallow so much water in such a short distance. We must find him, Taran cried. We dare not let him keep the Crocan. You should have left me and gone after him. He tried to climb to his feet. Come now, there is no time to lose. Fluter shook his head. I'm afraid there's no use in it. As our friend Gwistel might say, there's not a sign of him anywhere. We have no idea where he planned to go, or what he had in mind to do. He has too long a head start on us, and though I hate to admit it, I don't believe any of us, or all of us together, could do very much against him. The bard glanced at his broken arm. We're hardly in the best way to deal with the Crocan or Eledir, even if we found them. Taran stared silently into the fire. You, too, speak the truth, my friend, he said with great gloom. You have all done more than I could ever ask. Alas, much better than I. Yes, it would be useless now to seek Eledir, as useless as our quest has been. We have forfeited all for nothing, Adon's brooch, our honor, and now the Crocan itself. We shall return to Caer Dallben, empty-handed. Perhaps Eledir was right, he murmured. It is not fitting for a pig boy to seek the same honor as a prince. Pig boy? Ellenby cried indignantly. Don't ever speak of yourself that way. Taran of Caer Dallben, no matter what has happened. You're not a pig boy, you're an assistant pig keeper. That's honor in itself. Not that they don't mean roughly the same thing, when you come right down to it, she said. But one is proud, and the other isn't. Since you have a choice, take the proud one. Taran said nothing for a time, then raised his head to Ellenby. Adon once told me there is more honor in a field well plowed than in a field steeped in blood. As he spoke, his heart seemed to lighten. I see now that what he said was true above all. I do not begrudge Eledir his prize. I too shall seek honor, but I shall seek it where I know it will be found. The companions passed the night in the forest, and next morning turned southward across gentler land. They saw neither huntsmen nor Gwythaints, and they made little attempt at concealment, for as the bard had said, the forces of Auron sought the Crocan, and not a pitiful band of stragglers. Unburdened, they moved more easily, though without Luger and Melonlas their pace on foot was slow and painful. Taran trudged silently, his head bowed against the bitter wind. Dead leaves drove against his face, and he paid them no heed, filled as he was with the distress of his own thoughts. Some while after midday, Taran caught sight of movement among the trees covering a hill crest. Foreseeing danger, he urged the companions to hurry across the open meadow and find cover in a thicket. But before they could reach it, a party of horsemen appeared at the rise and galloped toward them. Taran and the bard drew their swords. Gurgi knocked an arrow into his bowstring, and the weary band made ready to defend themselves as best they could. Fluter suddenly gave a great shout and waved his sword excitedly. Put up your weapons, he cried. We're safe at last. These are Morgant's warriors. They bear the colors of the house of Maddock. The warriors pounded closer. Taran, too, cried out with relief. They were indeed King Morgant's riders, and at their head rode King Morgant himself. As they reined up beside their companions, Taran hurried to Morgant's steed and dropped to one knee. Well met, sire, he cried. We feared your men were servants of Auron. King Morgant swung down from the saddle. His black cloak was torn and travel-stained, his face haggard and grim, but his eyes still held the fierce pride of a hawk. A trace of a smile flickered on his lips. But you would have stood against us none the less, he said, raising Taran to his feet. What of Prince Gwydion, of Coll? Taran asked quickly, and with sudden uneasiness. We were separated at Dark Gate, and have had no word of them. Adon, alas, is slain, and Dolly too, I fear. Of the dwarf there has been no trace, answered Morgant. Lord Gwydion and Coll, son of Collfrue, are safe. They seek you even now, though. Morgant added with another half-smile. It has been my good fortune to find you. The huntsmen of Anuvan pressed us sharply at Dark Gate, Morgant went on. At last we fought free of them, and began our way toward Caer Cadarn, where Lord Gwydion hoped he would join us. We had not reached there, said Morgant, before we had word of you, and that you had taken it on yourselves to go to the marshes of Morva. That was a bold venture, Taran of Caer Dallben, Morgant added. As bold, perhaps, as it was ill-advised. You should learn that a warrior owes obedience to his lord. It did not seem we could do otherwise, Taran protested. We had to find the Crocan before Auron. Would you not have done the same? Morgant nodded curtly. I do not reproach your spirit, but would have you understand that Lord Gwydion himself would hesitate to make a decision of such weight. We would have known nothing of your movements, had not Gwythaints of the Fair Folk brought us news. Lord Gwydion and I separated then to search for you. Gwythaints? Elenwy interrupted. Not Gwythaints. Why, he wouldn't have done the least thing for us, until Dolly threatened to squeeze him. Gwythaints! All he wanted to do was to be let alone, and hide in his wretched burrow. Morgant turned to her. You speak without knowledge, princess. Among all who hold the wayposts, Gwythaints of the Fair Folk is the shrewdest and bravest. Did you believe King Eadleg would trust a lesser servant so close to a Nuven? But, he added, if you misjudged him, it was his intention that you do so. As for the Crocan itself, Morgant went on, as Taran looked to him in amazement, though you failed to bring it from Morva, Prince Eledir has done us noble service. Yes, Morgant added quickly, my warriors came upon him near the river Taran in the course of our search. From his words, I understood that you were drowned and your companions scattered, and that he bore the cauldron from Morva. That is not true, Elena began, her eyes flashing angrily. Be silent, Taran cried. No, I will not be silent, retorted Elenwy, spinning around to face Taran. You aren't going to tell me you think we're still bound by that oath he made us swear. What does she mean? Morgant asked. His eyes narrowed and he studied Taran closely. I'll tell you what I mean, Elenwy answered, heedless of Taran's protest. It's very simple. Taran paid for it, and paid dearly. We carried it almost on our backs every step of the way from Morva until Eledir came along. He helped us. He certainly did that, just the way a robber helps you tidy up your chamber. That's the truth of it, and I don't care what anybody else says. Does she indeed speak the truth? Morgant asked. When Taran did not answer, Morgant nodded slowly and continued in a thoughtful tone. I believe she does, though you stay silent. There is much of Prince Eledir's tale which rang false to me. As I once told you, Taran of Caerdalban, I am a warrior, and I know my men. But when you face Eledir himself, I shall know beyond all doubt. Come, said Morgant, helping Taran to his steed. We shall ride to my camp. Your task is ended. The Crocan is in my hands. Morgant's warriors took up the rest of the companions, and they galloped swiftly into the wood. The warlord had made camp in a wide clearing, well protected by trees, its approach guarded by a deep ravine, and the tents had been blended with a line of underbrush. Taran saw Luger and Melamlas tethered among the steeds of the warriors, a little apart. Islamok pawed the ground nervously and pulled at her halter. Near the center of the clearing, Taran caught his breath at the sight of the Black Crocan, which now had been removed from its sling. Though two of Morgant's warriors stood by it with drawn swords, Taran could not shake off the sense of fear and foreboding that hung, like a dark mist, about the cauldron. Do you not fear Aron will attack here and gain the cauldron once again? Taran whispered. Morgant's eyes hooded over, and he gave Taran a glance both of pride and anger. Whoever challenges me shall be met, he said coldly, be it the Lord of Enuven himself. A warrior drew aside the curtain of one of the pavilions, and the warlord led them inside. There, bound hand and foot, lay the still form of Eledir, his face covered with blood, and he appeared so grievously battered that Elenwy could not stifle a cry of pity. How is this? Taran exclaimed, running to Morgant in shock and reproach. Sire, he added quickly, your warriors had no right to use him so ill. This is shameful and dishonorable treatment. Do you question my conduct? Morgant replied. You have much to learn of obedience. My warriors heed my orders, and so shall you. Prince Eledir dared to resist me. I caution you not to follow his example. At a call from Morgant, armed guards strode quickly into the tent. The war leader made a brief gesture toward Taran and his companions. Disarm them, and bind them fast. This concludes Chapter 18. Thank you for listening, and remember, have a good day. You deserve it.